The Haymeadow, Day 1, Chapter 1. John Barron was 14 years old, just. Yesterday, he thought, I was 14 yesterday, and nothing changed. He wasn't sure what he wanted to change, or how it should change, or even why it should change, but he wanted something to change, and nothing had, and he felt cheated. He stopped halfway between the house and the horse barn and smelled the air, looking at the mountains to the west. It was early summer, and summers in Wyoming were hot, but it hadn't been hot yet, and he wondered if rain would break the cool spell and bring hot weather. They said weather came from the mountains, and it smelled of rain, and maybe it would change things. There it was again, he thought, change. Why did he want it to change? Heat made the sheep stink more and die more and get sick more, and they weren't up in the mountains yet. Why hope for heat? 4 dogs, drawn by the sound of the screen door slamming, came running from in back of the barn. They were border collies, named Pete, Billy, Jenny, and Peg, for working the sheep. They climbed on John, and he petted them and ruffled their hair. He scratched where something had bitten the back of Peg's neck. Black fly, mosquito, tick, or all of them. Once petted the dogs, swirled around him and made dust and were gone. John was wearing jeans and cowboy boots and a denim shirt and a straw summer western hat, and he lifted the hat. There was a white line where the hat kept the sun from burning. The rest of his face was past burned, past tanned, looked brown like brown leather. He had wide blue eyes and a straight mouth. He looked exactly like his father, who was also named John Barron, who looked like his father had looked when he was young, and his father who had started the ranch where they still lived. The Barron Spread, they called it. They said the old man, dead for 30 years, had come west with a gun and 2 horses. He was mean. John's father had told him on one of the rare occasions when they talked, meaner than 9 hells. He just said, "This is mine," and nobody dared argue. He had claimed 960,000 acres of Wyoming with nothing but that gun and 2 horses and a half-broken saddle, and made the claim stick, made the Barron Spread his and all his. Then he sent back east for a mail-order bride. Her name was Emma, and she tamed him some, and then turned as tough as him. She had John's grandfather in the back of the chuck wagon during Roundup, was out of one day having the baby, and then went back to cooking for the hands, and kept John's grandfather in an old dynamite box next to the stove. The wagon was still there, next to the barn, dried and weathered and not used, but sitting there. All of this John knew. All of this he'd been told, and told again, to be proud of it, to know it, and take pride in it, because it was family pride, and that was the only kind of pride to have, even though it was all gone. The ranch was called the 3 Bar S now, and had all sheep, and was owned, lock, stock, and barrel by Eastern corporations who had taken it over when the banks had foreclosed during the Great Depression because John's grandfather had made bad loans and didn't understand how to save money and be mean the way his father had been. The family was still there. They had never left. The corporations hired them to run the ranch, paid the family to stay and take care of things, be caretakers on their own place. But they owned nothing, the Barrons, and were supposed to be proud, John thought, looking at the old wagon where his grandfather had been born. Proud. Of nothing. Of being 14. Of nothing. "Hey, kid, where's your old man?" John looked to the corral in the back of the barn where Collie was working with a horse. Collie was one of the 2 permanent hired hands. The other was an old man named Tinkner. Horace Collie, always just called Collie, had been with the ranch since before John was born, was probably about 35, skinny with sloping shoulders and almost a perfect half-circle bitten out of the top of his right ear from a bar fight at a rodeo in Cheyenne years before. "Town," John said. "He's gone to town until evening. Left early this morning with Tink." "Dang." Collie was leaning against the corral fence, 3-inch steel pipes welded to uprights to make a steel circle 80 feet across. He spit tobacco juice in the dust. "What's the matter?" "I was going to work on that truck today, but I need plugs and a new fan belt. I should have told him to get the stuff in town." "Did he know about the truck?" "Yeah, we talked about it last night. Then he'll probably remember to get plugs and stuff on his own. We need the truck to pull the trailer up to the Haymeadow." John nodded but said nothing, and Collie went back to work. The truck was little more than a frame with a motor on it, an old 1951 GMC half-ton with a box gone and chains on the rear wheels. It only ran once a year, to pull the trailer up to the Haymeadow. The Haymeadow. John smiled when he thought of it. The Haymeadow was in a valley up in the mountains where the Barrons had always summered their cattle. It was 4 sections, 4 square miles, of sweet grass between 2 ridges of peaks, all at and above timberline. With the cattle gone and the ranch and sheep, every summer they took the sheep up there, and Tinkner would stay in the small shepherd's trailer, something like a covered wagon with rubber wheels that the old truck pulled up every summer, until it was fall and time to bring them down before the winter storms hit. Almost 3 months the old man stayed alone with the sheep and the 4 dogs, and once John had asked him if it wasn't lonely up there, with just the sheep. Got the dogs, Tink said. Well then, lonely with just the sheep and the dogs. Got the mountains. And John knew that if he kept asking, it would just keep going. Got the mountains, got the trees, got the rocks, got the elk. John had quit asking. Tinkner didn't like to talk much and sometimes went days without saying anything at all except to whistle at the dogs. Short whistles that meant go left, go right, take the sheep out, or bring them in. All command whistles. John knew some of the whistles, or knew how to do them, but there were many of them he didn't know. Tinkner could send 2 dogs out to bring in 2 sheep, open a gate, close the gate, then separate the 2 sheep and bring one in to shear, all with whistles. The dogs were part of him, almost knew what he was thinking. Chores, John thought. He couldn't stand around thinking all day. There were chores to do. He had to clean the barn, clip hooves on 2 horses, then start stocking the trailer for Tinkner. He smelled the air again. Rain. Maybe it would change things. Chapter 2. John barely remembered his mother. Long dark hair and a smile. He was 3 when she died. She loved to ride and had a horse come over on her backward, and she lived for a week, then was not alive anymore, and he didn't know much of her except pictures that his father kept, and now John wasn't sure if he remembered her at all or just thought he did from the pictures. He knew his father had loved her. No, that wasn't right either. He still loved her. He had never remarried, though there had been several opportunities. He beat the horse, Collie had said once, sitting drinking Canadian whiskey out of a small bottle next to the bunkhouse, with his hands. I couldn't stop him. He beat the horse to death. It broke his hands to do it, and I couldn't stop him. Once a month, John's father went to her grave, 23 miles away near the Sedown Baptist church. That wasn't a church anymore, but just a graveyard out in the middle of nowhere, on a bluff above a valley. She had loved mountains, his father said, and you could see the mountains from the gravesite, spread out wide and beautiful, and he thought she would want to be there, even though they weren't Baptist or anything else, for that matter. Once a month, they went there and cleaned the grave and put fresh plastic flowers in a small brass vase bolted to the granite stone. Cynthia Barron died in full beauty. And the date? He would bring a thermos of coffee and sit and talk to her, tell her things that had happened, and once he had brought John to spend the day. John tried to understand, but it all seemed vague, and after sitting staring at the stone, trying to remember her, trying to separate the memories from the pictures he'd seen and the things his father had told him, his mind drifted, and he didn't hear. His father had not taken him again, but still went, once a month, and everybody at the ranch was glad he did. It calms him, Collie said. You need that with him. They've all needed that, the Barons. Calming. There's that wild blood, that wilding blood in you that needs taming now and again. You'll need it too. John worked all morning. It took him 20 minutes each to clip the hooves on the 2 horses. It reminded him of cutting fingernails whenever he did it. One was a mare named Speck, and the other a large sorrel gelding named Spud. They were the same age, 11, and had been his horses, the ones he usually rode, for at least 6 years. Altogether, he didn't know how many horses the ranch had. Sometimes the rich people from the corporation would bring in 20 or 30, some of them plugged, some good, just to keep them. But the steady herd, John thought, must be over 100. Collie took care of the horses. He wouldn't work with sheep except to help in lambing and shearing, and when they moved them to the high country. I hate 'em, he said, and John agreed with him. They're stupid, and all they do is blow snot all over your legs when you walk through them and stink and die for no dang reason. Cattle maybe ain't much, but they beat sheep solid when it comes to brains. Cutting their hooves was just a matter of getting the clippers and bringing Spud and Speck into the stall. They'd done it so many times they would practically lean against the wall and raise each hoof to be clipped. He trimmed them evenly, mostly so he wouldn't be embarrassed when Al Spencer came to shoe them. Al came every year in late spring or early summer to shoe the horses they were going to use. They let the horses run shoeless all winter in the low country, but the ones they used to drive the sheep into the high country, to the Haymeadow, had to have shoes to be able to take the rocks. If the hooves were ragged when Al came to shoe them, he was due tomorrow. He would chew on John for it, and John would rather avoid the chewing. Like black butter, the hooves cut. They trimmed in neat little snicks. Then he used a rasp to even them off, even though Al would do it again when he came, even them around the shoes so they fit well. When he was done, John gave each of the horses a small handful of oats. They would get their regular ration later in the day, and turn them in back of the barn with the other horses pulled in for the drive into the high country. He loved the drive into the mountains. The sheep were slow, and they went down roads only with persistent coaxing and pushing. It took a week to make the drive, riding in the smell of them, ammonia from their urine, oily lanolin that made everything taste bitter from their skin, and the short wool, not grown much after spring shearing. Then there were the flies, hordes of them biting and stinging, swarming on the sheep and horses and dogs and him. Still, it always reminded John of what it must have been like to drive cattle in the old days. He had never done it. His whole life the ranch had been in sheep, and had only been on 5 drives. But driving cattle, just the words, cattle drive, seemed to draw him. He had read about it, everything he could get his hands on, and watched old movies. They had a satellite dish and received close to 200 channels, and he learned some from the movies, and much more from books he still could only imagine it, living in the saddle that way. His great-grandfather, it was said, kept a horse saddled by his house all the time, even at night, while he was sleeping, and wouldn't walk even to the outhouse to go to the bathroom. There were many legends about him, some of them true. He had ridden out the front of a stampede, ridden them out and turned them when another man would have run for his life or died, stomped into mush. The barn needed only minor cleaning, and he did it with the wheelbarrow and shovel, and the thought came while he was scooping up horse manure. A nudge thought. His great-grandfather wouldn't have cleaned the barn, wouldn't have gone to sheep, wouldn't have been too busy for his son. There, the thought had come before, not so much a year or 2 ago, but more often now, and not always when he really expected it, except that it sometimes came when he was doing something he didn't like, when he was studying. He hated studying and had to work at it, and his father made him do it, and his grades were all right, but he didn't like it, and sometimes the thought came, then, the old man would have spent more time with his son. Or during lambing. They had to be ready 24 hours a day when the lambs came, and it took about a week and a half, and the whole world seemed to be made of stink and afterbirth and dead lambs and dead sheep, and that led right into shearing, so that everybody worked until he dropped every night, and John hated it, and the thought would come then. He wouldn't have kept so much to himself. He would have talked more to his son, his blood. The problem was he didn't really know one way or the other what his great-grandfather would have done. He didn't know that much about him. Chapter 3. At noon, John went into the kitchen and made a sandwich with peanut butter, lunch meat, grape jelly, and a sliced pickle. He learned it from Jimmy Cranny, a friend in school. Jimmy went to the same school but lived nearly 45 miles away, so during the school year, they were best friends, and come summer, they just about didn't see each other. Jimmy's place was small, about 600 acres, and they raised Appaloosa horses, which wasn't cattle either, John thought, but then again, it wasn't sheep. They did all their own cooking at the ranch, which meant they ate mostly out of cans because usually there was too much work going to come in and cook, and John took the sandwich and a glass of milk up to his room. His room was the top back room in the 2-story ranch house. It was not the original Barron house that had been a log house and burned down under mysterious circumstances before even John's grandfather was born, but had been built around 1900. It was a frame construction with white painted wood boards for the walls, and the only thing John liked about it was the view, and he could sit in his room and look out the window and see the mountains. He had a small desk there, an old wooden table, really, and he sat at the desk and ate the sandwich and looked at the mountains while he chewed. When he was done, he cleaned the crumbs and dumped them in a small cardboard box he used for a wastebasket and started back out of the room, but stopped and looked at the poster on the wall. There were 4 pictures of his great-grandfather made during his entire life. That's all. 4. And John had made blow-ups of them, and had a photographic studio in Cheyenne make a large poster with the 4 pictures on it, and he could not come into the room without stopping to look at them. It was like looking at himself. The resemblance was more than striking. It was uncanny. Even John's father noticed it. At the same studio in Cheyenne, more as a joke than anything else, John had ordered an old-time photograph of himself, done with a floppy old cowboy hat and a broken Winchester the photographer had there for props. The picture was shot in black and white with a slightly fuzzy focus, and he had taped it on the wall next to the poster. It looked exactly the same slight droop to the left eyelid, the same straight nose, the same set of 2 shoulders and eyes that looked dead out into the camera. He could have put it in any of the pictures on the poster, and it would have fit perfectly, except that his great-grandfather had been older in the pictures, and had some marks of age, weathered lines in his face, and scruffier, torn clothes. And the gun. In every picture he was wearing a gun, an old Colt single-action, 45 caliber, with smooth wooden grips, and a worn, oiled cartridge belt and holster. John did not carry a gun, but he had seen the gun owned by his great-grandfather. John's father had it in a wooden box, along with the old man's chaps, scarred and ripped, and a pair of his work gloves. They had the ends of the fingers cut off so he could feel the rope or use the gun easily. It was heavy, the gun, and it didn't look heavy in any of the pictures. John had picked it up, hefted it, aimed it, and it must have weighed close to 4 pounds. maybe 5 with a cartridge belt full of shells in the holster. 5 pounds on one hip his whole life, and except to go to bed, he was said never to take it off. And when he finally grew so old, he made 92, if the records were accurate, that they had to put him in a nursing home. He took the gun with him and kept it. They were nervous about it in the home and removed the firing pin, and he kept the gun, and it was hanging next to his head the night he died in 1954. John had studied the poster so long he'd memorized everything on it, and yet he stopped every minute, or every time he came into the room and looked at it and wondered what it would have been like if he had lived then and somehow had known the old man when he was young, and had only the gun and 2 horses and all that land before the Eastern corporations took it. He shook his head and left the room. There was work to do still, and he put his hat on and went outside. Was walking across the open space leading to the barn when he saw the dust. From the yard and house area, which is on a slight rise, it was possible to see the 1.5 miles to the main road. It was low, rolling hills of grass with small rocky outcroppings, and he saw that a vehicle had turned off the main road and was coming toward the ranch. It left a plume of dust, and for a moment he couldn't recognize it. Then it crested a rise, and he saw the dark blue of the ranch pickup. "They're coming back early," Collie said. He'd seen the dust as well and was leaning on the rail of the corral. "I'll bet he didn't get the plugs and belt." John shrugged. "I don't know." It was strange for his father to come back early. The trip to town took close to an hour and a half, one way, and he didn't like to waste it. Usually he did it once and stayed all day, rather than have to make another trip soon. He watched the truck, and when it was still over a quarter mile away, he saw that his father was alone. "Where's Tink?" Collie asked. "Your old man is alone." John said nothing, but stood and waited while his father drove into the yard and stopped the truck next to him. Collie had come from the corral, and the dust cloud that followed the truck settled over them. John's father stepped from the truck. "Where's Tink?" Collie asked. John's father spit, looked past the barn to the lambing pens, but he wasn't seeing anything. They were empty. All the sheep and lambs were off on the west side of the ranch in a 400-acre pasture, being held so they could be more easily started on the drive to the mountains. "Tink's not coming back," he said after a moment. "Not coming back?" John asked. "Why?" "He's got a cancer. They've got to do some more tests on him, but the doc told me that he thought it was all through him and tests would just confirm it." He was still looking at the lambing pens as if something very important were out there. "I've got to go back. They're going to try some different ways to fix it, and I should be there. It don't look so good." "Dang," Collie rubbed his neck. "Old Tink. Dang. I don't know how long I'll be. I'll stay with him until it doesn't matter. The doc says if the therapy doesn't work, it'll go fast, but it might be 2 weeks or a month or even longer before it ends. I can come home now and again, but I should be there as much as I can." "What about the drive up to the Haymeadow?" Collie asked. John was thinking about Tinkner. How he did things, the way he looked, putting snooze in his lower lip, the way he smiled. Gone. "Tink worked here, man and boy," John's father said. "He worked with my father, John's grandfather, and knew his great-grandfather. We're his family, and I can't let him rot alone." Rot, John thought. He was going to rot. Old Tink. God. "I know," Collie said. "I wasn't arguing with you. I just meant, what about it?" "You and the boy," John's father looked at him. "You and John take them up, and you can do it. Then you come back down, and John stays with the sheep." "Me?" John said. "Alone?" "No, you'll have the dogs." Yes, John thought. "And the sheep, and the mountains, and the coyotes, and the bears, and, I don't know what to do. How to do it?" He wouldn't do it, he thought. Not the old man. It slipped in. A quick thought. "There's nothing to know. You take the dogs, and you take care of the sheep. I did it when I was 15, and you can do it. Collie has to be here to run the ranch. The folks from back east are coming, and we have to be ready for them. And I have to spend time with Tink." "I'll take him up there," Collie said. "Don't worry about it. We'll talk as we go, and he'll be fine. Heck, you weren't you? He's as good as you." The 2 men smiled, and John's father left them, went into the house, and was out in 3 minutes with his shaving kit and a paper sack with magazines. "Tink likes the Stockman magazines," he said, dumping the sack and the knit on the seat of the truck. "What he really likes is Playboy," Collie said. "Not in the hospital." John's father climbed in the truck. "In the hospital, he likes Stockman magazines." He nodded at John and wheeled the truck and drove away. Not 15 minutes had passed since he arrived, and John watched him drive away until it was just the dust out by the main road. He watched until even the dust was gone, settling back. Then he turned toward the barn. Well, he thought, you wanted a change.